So we're up to episode number 6 of our mini-series on my journey and my journey toward Dream Farm 1.0. And Ethan has a real interest in this because he's ready to do Dream Farm 1.0 himself. And so some of the things that I've learned, he's able to apply, and then hopefully there's some stuff that I've learned along the way that you can benefit from too. So he's been asking me questions to kind of keep the ball rolling. And the joke, of course, that we have is that I can't pay Ethan and he can't buy his dream farm if we don't have sponsors. So you're going to help Ethan to buy his dream farm by supporting our sponsors. Dream Farm is brought to you by Whitetail Institute Food Plot Blends, the Hunt Stand Pro Whitetail app, and Hoyt Archery. It's on you guys.
It is on you guys. No pressure.
No pressure.
But it's on you.
Yep. If you don't come through and buy one of those expensive Hoyt bows, Ethan is going to have to hunt public land for the rest of his life.
And that's no good.
All right, enough. The way we left it, I'd gotten to the 1,000 acres. And there was a lot of moving parts along the way, and we only touched a little bit on some of those. So if there's something along the way, like there were even 2 transactions, 2 properties that I bought that I left completely out. That I would have to go back and try to recreate, where those fell into the timeline. But we were at 1,000 acres. I'm not going to get any bigger now. This is a lot of work. People think, it's awesome. The more the merrier. And you're right. The more the merrier, but you also have to manage all of that. And that means that you've got all these food plots that you need to do. You've got timber stand improvements. You've got property improvements. You've got government contracts that you need to maintain. You've got farming relationships that you need to establish and maintain, with a cash rent farmer, or you've got to figure out, how to manage all the little pieces, keep the waterways. When the creek comes up and blows out some crossing, you've got to be able to, take the time to repair that. So it's really a lot of work. And it's a labor of love, but it still does take time. So I was done at 1,000. I knew that I'd hit my limit. Even if financially I could have kept going, I wasn't going to buy more. That was it. I would have had to hire, a full-time land manager in order to, continue to do what I was doing. So people ask, what is the perfect size farm? I've had people ask me that. I think 600 acres, if it's the right layout, the right composition of tillable versus, the cover habitat, I think that's about perfect because it's a manageable enough size that you can get all the work done, you can keep it in good shape, but it's also big enough that, there's plenty of hunting opportunities. Let's say a 240 is a nice size too. There's a lot of 240s out there, anywhere between 240 and 600. But if somebody says, what is perfect? Well, for me, and granted, I just love land, so I'll just keep buying land until I didn't have any money left. But that's, again, I said there's a point of no return. But if you're going to say from a manageable, where the workload is manageable, I feel like 600 acres, anything past that, it starts to get where you need, a fair amount of help. So anyway, going back over my journey, what questions pop up to you?
I guess the question I just had that just popped up in my head is, what is like the minimum amount of acres do you think you would need to manage or maybe grow a deer?
Gosh, it's like thousands. It sounds bad.
Yeah.
It kind of takes the wind out of everybody's sails, but I've talked to a lot of different people, including biologists and people who own a lot of land, and if you don't have good neighbors and you're an island unto yourself, you got to figure what is the range of these bucks that live on there. How often do they leave your property where they're vulnerable on the neighbor's property if they aren't on the same path that you're on? You have to have quite a lot of land in order to keep the full range of that buck that's in the middle of the property from ever leaving, and getting shot on the neighboring properties. Well, I don't know what the number is. It's, several thousand acres, 2, 3, 4,000 acres, where you control your own destiny. Anything short of that, yeah, you can protect some of the bucks some of the time, but you can't protect, hardly any of them all of the time, right? So you still need some luck that your neighbors aren't just happen to be there when that deer jumped the fence, or you need neighbors that aren't going to shoot those bucks that you're passing up. So, you say, well, what's the minimum size? What is the maximum size? The maximum size is easier to define than the minimum size, because the minimum size really depends on the quality of your neighbors. If you're in a really good area and everybody's working together, you could probably get by with a 40. They're not going to like you, probably, because you're going to be seen as a net consumer, whereas they're going to feel like they're the stewards. They're the net, producers, so to speak. And you're the net consumer because you're killing more than you're producing, from the standpoint of mature bucks. So, I talked with a biologist one time at some length about it, and he said that in the Midwest, 200 acres, takes 200 acres probably on average to produce a nice mature buck. So, like, let's say, I'm not saying that, they need that much, for food and everything. It's like, that's what the distribution is. So if you've got 400 acres, it's realistic that you could kill a couple of them a year and you're not depleting the resource. So then you're looking at it saying, well, I've got a 40. What does that mean, that every 5 years I can kill a buck? You're not going to do that. So that's one of the games that, or the arguments that everybody gets into. It's like, well, my neighbors are killing all of my bucks. Well, there you go. Welcome to the real world. Ideally, you'd be in the neighborhoods where that doesn't happen.
Yep.
Where most of the landowners are fairly large owners. They're not sitting there with their, themselves and their 2 kids on 40 acres. They've got enough land where, they're sort of on that same ratio that you are of how many you're killing.
So how do you go about that? So, like, you're looking to buy into this neighborhood. How do you know that it's not a neighborhood where they're just killing every small buck there is? Like, is it, just networking, talking to a bunch of people at the local diner shop or whatever, and, finding out this is a really good area, or, what's your process for that?
Yeah, I think you got to stick with what you know. I think that's what it boils down to. It's sort of like when you're buying your dream farm. You're going to be a little bit more concerned with that than you might be, if you're buying investment land. But again, like I said earlier in one of the earlier episodes, you don't want to buy investment land and then have it be, something where, it's not that great, because you're going to have to try to sell it at some point, so you have to do the research. You've got to kick over the rocks. You've got to go and find out. Or, like in my case, I had a really good network through the game wardens throughout Iowa, and I could call pretty much any one of them, and I'd met them somewhere along the way, because my friendship circle included a lot of those people, and I could ask them about specific properties. I'd say, well, I'm thinking about buying XYZ. What's going on in that area? Are there guys running coon hounds and coyote dogs all the time, and am I going to have problems with trespassing and poaching? Are there any big deer that, in your travels, in your, experience in that area? Like, what is that area like? Mm-hmm. So I could get some really, really good unfiltered intelligence from those guys. That was kind of my primary go-to. Even when Jacob was thinking about buying some land in another part of the state, he asked me what I knew about it, and I put him in touch with the game warden from that area. So
Yep.
But they're not going to like you calling them at 6 o'clock in the afternoon and trying to pull them off dinner with their family if they don't know who you are. So, it kind of comes back to what we talked about earlier. You're only as good as your network. Mm-hmm. So, rely on some of those relationships that you have. A friend of a friend in that situation is almost as good as the friend himself. Mm-hmm. So, long-winded. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I guess I have another one too. So after all of you're to 1,000 acres now, Is there anything that you wish you knew at the start that you you
Yeah.
learned along the way?
Well,
Maybe there's a bunch of things, but like,
yeah.
is there one thing that sticks out more than others?
Yeah, I think so. So we had to move because the light was starting to change in here. But so you had a question.
Yep. So basically, what would you wish you knew at the start that you know now, or for your land buying process?
I think the stuff that fell into place, like we talked about, it's almost like God's hand was on it. Like all these pieces all fell into place, and I never really felt like that I was orchestrating this thing. I was kind of like along for the ride, so to speak. I mean, obviously I was trying to get stuff going and make things happen, but you can't make somebody sell. You can't make opportunities come up. That all just kind of fell into my lap. But so I don't know that I would change any of the things that I did, but I wish I had known early that how much value there was in the timber in that area that was overlooked. I mean, people just didn't understand then how much timber value there was in some of this recreational land, and the farmers, the old time farmers, they saw the trees as a liability. They kind of hated them, so it wasn't like they sat around thinking, oh, I can't wait until this tree gets mature so I can harvest it. It was like, I wish I didn't have any trees here, because they're trying to raise cattle. They can't run cows in the timber, So anyway, there was a lot of properties that you could buy for a third of market price in the end because it had so much timber value. And I don't even know that the farmers would have begrudged you that because they didn't see it as having any value. When I started, there wasn't a recreational land category. There was just land. Farmers owned land. And sometimes hunters would buy land. Nobody understood why they would want it because you couldn't feed a cow on it. You couldn't, raise an ear of corn on it. Why would you possibly want to own this? So I remember farmers way back when would just give away the timber. You'd buy the fields and they'd just give you the rest. It's like, because they didn't attribute value to it. So it took quite a while before anybody started to realize that timber had value. I would have bought more land. I would have been a little bit more aggressive trying to find land earlier, like when the process first started, like in 1995. When I got into that subchapter S corporation, I could have started buying land right then with no money, practically, because it just, the timber value was underestimated. But now it's pretty well understood.
Yeah.
But
it's like almost like there's no secrets anymore.
No, I don't think there are. That's why I said there's really no secrets in what we're doing.
Yeah.
Because
you could just, like we were saying, you can just go on Google right now and just say how much is a mature walnut?
Right. Yeah.
And back then it was just like.
It was whatever the logger told them.
Yeah.
And the logger's not going to say, oh, that's worth $2,000 when he wants to buy it for $200.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't know that I would change anything, but I would like to have known how the timber, what trees were really worth. I wish I'd understood that earlier. Mm-hmm. Once the process got started, I figured that out because Mike Noble took all that time to teach me. But prior to that, when I first started in 1995, I could have bought an awful lot of land, right away, just for the trees that were on it. So there's that. So I think, we might be, I think we're hitting the end of this episode. We better knock off here. I forgot my egg timer over at the table. But let's knock off here and we'll have one more left. So was this 5?
This was 6.
Okay, so it's going to be a 7-part series. We're going to wrap it up in the next episode where we kind of go through this whole, discussion of what is a dream farm, how do you get there, how do you decide what your goal really is. I mean, I ended up with 1,000 acres. That's where I stopped. Somebody might say, well, gosh, why didn't you keep going? Or somebody else might have said, man, I can't even hope to get that far. My dream farm is 160. We need to figure out, this whole thing of what is a dream farm and how do you know when you've got it, where you stop looking. So anyway, I'm running out of, my voice box is starting to get tired. We appreciate you joining us, and we'll catch you up on the next and last episode of my journey on the Dream Farm. So we'll see you back here in a little bit, and remember to always dream big.